What if the world woke up one day and realized that the man it trusted more than any god had quietly become its greatest fear? The sky over Manhattan split with a sound like glass breaking, not from an explosion, but from silence snapping under pressure. No alarms screamed, no missiles launched. There was only a shadow moving against the cloud, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Superman hovered there, cape still, eyes unreadable, listening, not for cries, for help. Not for disasters, but for something else entirely. For years, the world had slept peacefully, knowing he was out there, watching, protecting, restraining himself. Tonight, restraint ended. Deep beneath the city, in a reinforced chamber lined with mutant tech, a single heartbeat accelerated. Professor Charles Xavier's fingers tightened on the armrest of his chair as a wave of pressure rolled across his mind, an unfamiliar weight, vast and disciplined, pressing against every thought on the planet like a hand testing the strength of glass. He's thinking too clearly, Xavier whispered, too calmly. In Westchester, alarms howled through the Xavier Institute. Students froze mid-training as their powers flickered, distorted, as if reality itself had shifted its stance toward them. Jean Grey clutched her head, eyes blazing, for a fraction of a second before dimming again. Logan's claws slid halfway out of his hands on instinct. Tell me I'm wrong. Logan growled, staring up at the ceiling as if he could see through it. Tell me that's not him. Across the globe, Magneto stood alone on a mountain fortress, metal trembling faintly around him. He felt it too. Not power unleashed, but power deciding. Superman wasn't angry. That was the terrifying part. For decades, mutants had been the world's convenient fear, hunted, regulated, catalogued. Superman had watched it all, intervened sometimes, which spoke of unity, believed, truly believed, that humanity would grow. But tonight, floating above a city that never stopped judging what it couldn't control, Superman reached a conclusion that chilled even his own heart. Hope had failed in the milliseconds it took for him to decide. 1,000 futures aligned in his mind, Xavier's dream collapsing under endless fear. Magneto's war feeding on that fear. Governments escalating, sentinels multiplying, extinction dressed up as security. Every path led to the same result. If mutants remained unchecked, humanity would destroy itself trying to contain them. And if humanity remained afraid, mutants would never know peace. Superman closed his eyes. When he opened them, the world felt smaller. The first sonic boom shattered windows across 5 city blocks as he vanished, reappearing above the Xavier Institute before anyone could react. Searchlights snapped on. Defensive systems activated. Telepaths reached out and hit a wall they could not penetrate. Superman descended slowly onto the lawn, boots sinking slightly into the earth, as if the planet itself was bracing. Students watched from windows. Teachers gathered behind invisible barriers. Xavier rolled forward, meeting him face to face, beneath a sky that felt suddenly too close. "Cleft," Xavier said carefully, already knowing the answer to the question he was about to ask. "Why are you here?" Superman looked past him, at the children training to be weapons, at a fear masked as discipline, at the endless cycle repeating itself again and again. "I'm here," Superman said, voice steady, almost gentle, "to prevent a future where everyone loses." And somewhere deep in the Institute, Jean Grey felt something ancient stir in response. Because for the first time since he arrived on Earth, Superman wasn't here to save the world. He was here to change it by force, if necessary. What if the world's kindest protector calmly told its most vulnerable children that their freedom was about to end, truly believed it was mercy? The lawn of the Xavier Institute felt unnaturally still, as if the wind itself had chosen not to interfere. Professor Xavier searched Superman's face for anger, for grief, for anything human enough to argue with. He found none of it, only certainty. "You're proposing imprisonment," Xavier said slowly, his voice echoing in Superman's mind as much as the air between them. "For an entire people, children, Clark." Superman didn't flinch at the telepathic contact. He allowed it, let Xavier feel the weight of his resolve, the calculations, the futures branching and collapsing behind his eyes. "I'm proposing survival," Superman replied. "For mutants, for humans, for the planet." Around them, students watched through reinforced glass, fear crawling across young faces that had already seen too much of the world's cruelty. Scott Summers clenched his fists, visor humming faintly. Aurora Monroe felt the sky above her respond to her emotions, clouds tightening like a held breath. "You don't get to decide this," Scott said, stepping forward despite Xavier's unspoken warning. "Not even you." Superman's gaze shifted. To him, just slightly. The pressure in the air increased, not aggressively, but undeniably, like gravity choosing a new direction. "I've decided far less than you think," Superman said. This decision was made the moment humanity proved it would never stop being afraid of what it can't control. Inside the mansion, alarms died one by one. Not because Superman destroyed them, but because they no longer mattered. Every system, every failsafe, every secret bunker Xavier had ever designed appeared in Superman's mind like open books. He didn't need to break them. He simply stepped beyond them. Jean staggered back from a window, heart pounding. "He's not blocking me," she whispered. "He's letting me see." And what she saw terrified her. Not cruelty, not domination, but a future where mutants were catalogued, relocated, contained in sanctuaries, protected by Superman himself. No sentinels, no genocide, no fear-driven wars. Just order. Jean Lucan muttered, catching her before she fell. "Get out of my head. Tell me he's wrong." Jean couldn't, because buried beneath Superman's plan was something horrifyingly logical. Superman turned back to Xavier. "I will build places where mutants are safe, shielded from governments, from extremists, from each other. You can help, guide it, or you can resist. And if we resist," Xavier asked quietly. Superman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Then I stop you before someone gets hurt." Half a world away, Metal screamed as Magneto felt the shift. Satellites veered off course. Compasses spun uselessly. Eric Lenscher smiled nod with joy, but recognition. "So," Magneto said too, "the empty sky, the god finally chooses a side." Within minutes, the world knew something was wrong. News feeds cut mid-sentence. Aircraft experienced momentary loss of control as Superman passed through airspace faster than sensors could track. Military leaders received no threats, only a single broadcast, appearing simultaneously on every screen on Earth. Superman's face filled the frame. Calm, resolute. "This is not an invasion," he said. "This is an intervention." Governments demanded answers. Mutant leaders demanded resistance. Civilians watched in stunned silence as the symbol of hope spoke words that felt uncomfortably final. "At this moment," Superman continued, "all mutant activity is under my authority. Any attempt to harm them will be met with immediate response. Any attempt to escalate will end." "And what about our freedom?" someone shouted from a crowded street, their voice somehow carrying through the broadcast. Superman paused. Just long enough to remind the world he still felt things. "Freedom without safety," he said, "is just a prettier word for extinction." The broadcast ended. Back at the Institute, Xavier closed his eyes, reaching out across the planet to mutants in hiding. Two leaders preparing to strike. One man bending the world with the quiet confidence of inevitability. And somewhere beneath it all, something ancient and powerful listened. Because Superman had made his move, and the world's response, human and mutant alike, about to decide whether he would remain a guardian or become something far worse. What if the first two openly challenge? Superman wasn't a frightened government or a desperate mutant, but the one man who had been preparing for this moment his entire life. The air above the Atlantic screamed as Magneto tore himself free from gravity, metal bending eagerly to his will. Satellites warped. Warships groaned as hulls twisted like soft clay. Across the world, every machine felt his anger and his anticipation. "So," Magneto said aloud, wind whipping his cape, "the alien decides he knows what's best for my people." Superman felt him coming long before he appeared. Not through sound or sight, but through disruption, electromagnetic chaos rolling across the planet like a drumbeat. Clark hovered above the ocean, cape rippling, eyes steady. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't prepare a strike. He waited. Magneto arrived. In a storm of torn steel and ionized air, a halo of twisted metal orbiting him like a crown. Missiles, drones, fragments of satellites all frozen in place at his gesture. "You don't get to cage us," Magneto snarled. "Not you, not anyone." "I'm not caging anyone," Superman replied. "I'm ending the cycle that keeps getting you killed." Magneto laughed a sharp, bitter sound. That's what tyrants always say. Without warning, the metal halo collapsed inward, slamming into Superman with the force of a meteor strike. The ocean below exploded upward in a towering plume as Superman was driven into the water, vanishing beneath the waves. For a heartbeat, Magneto believed it. Then the sea stilled. Superman rose from the depths, water cascading off him, suit scorched but intact. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. I hoped, Superman said, you'd see this before it came to this. Magneto's eyes widened not in fear, but in realization as every piece of metal around him suddenly refused to move. Not controlled. Not countered. Ignored. Ignored. Superman moved faster than thought. One moment he was 20 meters away, the next his hand closed gently but firmly around Magneto's wrist. The electromagnetic storm collapsed instantly, metal falling harmlessly into the ocean. You can't, Magneto hissed, straining, veins standing out. You can't stop evolution. I'm not stopping it, Superman said softly. I'm protecting it from itself. He didn't punch Magneto. He didn't break him. He simply took him. Within seconds, Magneto was gone, removed from the battlefield, delivered to a containment field Superman had designed not as a prison, but as a sanctuary no one else could breach. A place beyond governments, beyond armies. Beyond Magneto's reach. The message was clear. Resistance was possible. Victory was not at the Xavier Institute. The psychic backlash hit like a scream. Xavier gripped his temples as millions of minds reacted at once: panic, anger, relief, terror. Scott slammed his fist into a wall. Aurora turned away from the window, rain beginning to fall without her realizing it. He took him, Logan growled. Just took him. Jean said nothing. She was somewhere else. Deep inside her mind, a presence stirred, ancient, burning, curious. It felt Superman's resolve brush against it and recoiled, not in fear, but in interest. Elsewhere, governments scrambled. Sentinel programs were activated across multiple continents only to shut down mid-launch systems overridden by a single red and blue blur, moving faster than command protocols could react. One by one, the tools of mutant oppression were dismantled, not violently, but completely. Superman wasn't fighting a war. He was ending one before it could begin. And yet, as he hovered above the earth, listening to the planet's shifting heartbeat, Clef felt it, the subtle change. The way people looked up now wasn't gratitude. It was calculation, fear, and somewhere in the psychic depths of the world, something powerful smiled. Because if Superman truly believed this was the only way, then someone would have to show him the cost. What if the greatest danger to Superman's plan wasn't open rebellion, but the quiet realization that even hope can be feared when it stops asking permission? The world didn't erupt into chaos after Magneto vanished. It did something far more unsettling. It adapted. Cities continued to function. Markets opened. Children went to school. Mutants, for the first time in generations, walked openly through streets without being chased or whispered about. No sentinels stalked the skies. No registration squads kicked down doors. Superman made sure of that. And yet, something felt wrong. Clark hovered miles above the planet, hearing everything. Heartbeats, steady, voices calm. But beneath it all was a tension he couldn't ignore, tightening, like a muscle preparing to snap. Humanity wasn't panicking. It was thinking. They're waiting, Clark murmured to himself. He drifted downward, landing silently on a rooftop overlooking Metropolis. His city glowed beneath him, beautiful and fragile. He had saved it 1,000 times. Now it felt like it was studying him. You've crossed a line, Bruce Wayne said from the shadows. Clark didn't turn. He'd known Bruce was there the moment his boots touched concrete. I was wondering how long it would take you, Clark replied. Batman stepped into the light, cape still, expression grim. You didn't ask for help. You didn't ask for, couldn't say you just decided. I asked for years, Clark said quietly. I asked them to stop, to change, to do better. And now you're forcing them, Bruce shot back. That's not justice. That's control. Clark finally faced him. Is it control when I stop a child from being burned alive because of what they are? Bruce's jaw tightened. It is when you decide who gets to choose. Before either could say more, Clark froze. Not physically, psychically. A pressure brushed his mind, not an attack, but an echo, vast, burning, curious. Jean Grey screamed at the Xavier Institute. Windows, shattered as a psychic shockwave rippled outward. Students collapsed. Teachers scrambled. Xavier's chair rolled backward as he felt it, to the presence he had spent his life fearing and revering, the Phoenix. He whispered, "It's waking up." Jean hovered inches above the floor, eyes blazing with cosmic fire. Her voice wasn't entirely her own. "He changed the balance," she said, staring at nothing and everything. "He made the world too still." Across the globe, Clark felt it now, reality flexing under a force older than him, older than Earth. The Phoenix Force didn't hate him, it questioned him. "What gives you the right?" it asked, not in words, but in instinct, in cosmic judgment. Kleck clenched his fists. "Someone has to protect them." "Protection that removes choice," the Phoenix answered, "is another kind of destruction." The sky above the Institute ignited as Clark arrived, the ground cracking beneath his landing. He took in the scene, instantly Jean, suspended in fire, Xavier weakened, students terrified. "Jean," Clark said gently, "you need to fight it." She turned to him, eyes burning like stars being born. "I'm not fighting it," she said. "I'm listening." Energy surged. Time itself seemed to hesitate, and for the first time since he made his decision, Superman felt something he hadn't accounted for. Not resistance, judgment, because the Phoenix wasn't here to stop him. It was here to test whether the world needed saving from mutants, or from him. What if the force that judged gods and devoured stars decided that Superman himself might be an imbalance the universe could no longer tolerate? The air above the Xavier Institute burned without heat, warped without wind. Superman hovered a few feet above the ground, cape frozen mid-motion, as if reality itself was holding its breath around him. "Jean-Ol," the Phoenix looked at him not with anger, but with something far more dangerous. "Disappointment. Your act," the Phoenix said through Jean's voice, as though order is mercy. Clark felt a weight of it, then not physical, not psychic in any way he'd known before. This wasn't pressure meant to crush him, it was gravity meant to measure him. "I act because no one else will," Superman said, "because I can hear the fear every second. Mutants hunted, humans panicking, the future collapsing into war no matter which side wins. And so you removed choice," the Phoenix replied. "You froze the world at a moment you found acceptable." Xavier struggled to sit upright, pain etched across his face. "Clark, even if your intentions are pure, the mind does not heal under a cage made of safety." Superman turned to him. "Char, I gave them peace." "For how long?" Xavier asked softly. "Until they grow afraid of you instead?" That question hit harder than Magneto's storm. Across the globe, that fear was already blooming. In underground facilities, scientists whispered about contingency plans. In hidden bunkers, old Sentinel blueprints were pulled back into the light not to hunt mutants, but to study Superman. Politicians spoke carefully, publicly praising peace, while privately asking the same forbidden question: how do you stop a God who believes he's right? Batman stood alone in the Batcave, staring at holographic projections of Superman's movements, patterns emerging like a slow, inevitable noose. "He's not angry," Bruce muttered. "That's the problem." Back at the Institute, the Phoenix's fire flared brighter, cosmic wings stretching across the sky like the shadow of a burning bird. "You tipped the balance," it told Clark. "The universe responds." Without warning, the Phoenix struck not with violence, but with revelation. Clark saw it all. A future where mutant sanctuaries became permanent, where children born with powers never knew open skies, where humans lived peacefully, under watchful silence. No wars, no genocides, no freedom. Clark reeled, barely steadying himself in midair. "Those futures don't have to happen." "They will," the Phoenix said, "because you will not stop. You cannot. Not now that you've decided." The ground cracked as Clark descended, eyes hardening not with rage, but resolve. "Then help me do it better," he said. "Gut it. Shape it. Don't tear it down." For a moment, just a moment, the Phoenix hesitated, and that hesitation echoed across reality like a warning bell, because far away, beyond Earth's atmosphere, something else had noticed the shift, something ancient, strategic, watching not with judgment, but with intent. A presence began to move toward Earth, one that didn't care about balance, freedom, or hope, only conquest. And Superman, standing between a cosmic judge and a fearful world, no idea which threat he would have to face first. What if the universe's answer to Superman's certainty wasn't judgment, but invasion? The stars screamed before anyone on Earth understood why. Clef heard at first a distortion in the cosmic background, like a blade dragged across reality. He looked up, past the phoenix's burning wings, past the blue of the sky, and into something moving with terrible purpose. "Something's coming," he said. The phoenix felt it too. Its fire dimmed, not from fear, but calculation. "Not a response," it murmured. "An opportunist. Above the planet, space folded inward. Not a tear. Like a portal. Not a rift. A convergence, dozens of massive vessels sliding out of hyperspace with brutal precision. Their hulls were dark, angular, alive with energy that drank in starlight instead of reflecting it. Apocalyptian warships. Boom tubes erupted across orbit like open wounds, each one vomiting legions of parademons into the void, their screeches echoing even through vacuum as if reality itself carried the sound. Batman's voice cut through Clark's communicator, sharp and controlled. "You seeing this?" "Yes," Clark said. "I was hoping you weren't." On the Larz's vessel, carved from obsidian and fire, a throne rose from the deck. A massive figure stood, arms crossed, eyes burning like dying suns. "DARKSEID. Double quotes. So Darkseid rumbled, his voice transmitted not through speakers but through fear itself. "This world finally breaks its leash." The phoenix recoiled slightly, not in weakness, but recognition. "Tyrant," it hissed. "World breaker." Darkseid smiled. "Judge," he replied. "Executioner." Superman rose into the upper atmosphere, body outlined by Earth's curve behind him. "This planet is under my protection," he said. "Leave." Darkseid laughed, a sound like planets cracking. "You misunderstand. I didn't come because it's weak." The parademons halted mid-descent, frozen by a single raised hand. "I came," Darkseid continued, eyes locking onto Clark, "because it finally belongs to someone worth conquering." Below, the world watched the sky darken. Civilians screamed as emergency broadcasts replaced each other in chaos. Mutants and humans alike looked up at the same threat, the same impossible armada. At the Xavier Institute, Jean collapsed to her knees, phoenix fire flickering wildly. "This isn't about us anymore," she whispered. "He's here for him." Xavier felt it, the way the future twisted violently, branching into horrors he could barely comprehend. "Clerk," he reached out telepathically. "If you fight him alone, I know." Clerk replied, already accelerating upward. "I won't." He stopped halfway between Earth and the fleet, turning back toward the planet. For the first time since this began, Superman hesitated. Every instinct told him what to do. He could meet Darkseid head-on, buy time, maybe even win. But victory would come at a cost, measured in cities, in lives, in the very trust he had already fractured. And below him mutants he had promised safety. Humans who now feared him. Heroes, watching, waiting. Batman's voice again, quieter now. "This is the moment, Clark. Whatever you choose next, that's who you are, forever." Superman closed his eyes. When he opened them, he made a choice that shocked the universe. He turned back toward Earth and called for help. Everyone. His voice rang across every frequency, every mind, every hidden corner of the planet. Mutant, human, hero, villain, if you can hear me, I need you. Darkseid's smile widened. "Good," he said. "Let them all see what you truly are. Because this battle wouldn't just decide Earth's fate, it would decide whether Superman was still its greatest hope, or the reason it burned. What if the moment Superman asked the world for help was the first time anyone truly saw how fragile his control had become? The response came faster than Clark expected and slower than he feared. From Wakanda's skies to Latveria's iron towers, from hidden mutant enclaves to underground villain lairs, heads tilted upward, not in obedience, in disbelief. The man who had bent the world into stillness was asking, not commanding. Assembling. Iron Man rocketed into the upper atmosphere. First, nanotech armor flaring as his sensors struggled to process apocalyptic energy signatures. "I'm not saying I trust you," Tony said over Oplicoms, "but I trust Darkseid less." Green energy cut through space as the Green Lantern Corps arrived in force. Emerald constructs forming shields between Earth and the descending parade. Jon Stewart's voice carried with solemn authority. "This is Lantern space now. From the shadows of broken cities, mutants emerged, Storm riding the jet stream, Magneto tearing free from his sanctuary with a roar of defiance, metal singing in his wake. "You don't own us," Magneto snarled as he took position beside Superman. "But I won't let him take us either." Superman nodded once. "That's enough." Darkseid watched it all unfold, unimpressed. "Unity born of fear," he said. "It never lasts." With a gesture, the war began. Boom tubes widened, spilling, parademans in numbers that blotted out the stars. Omega beams lanced through space, forcing lantern constructs to shatter and reform. The Phoenix surged back to full brilliance, cosmic fire ripping through entire squadrons in silence. Superman moved like a living weapon, intercepting beams, tearing through warships, pushing back an invasion that should have already ended worlds. But this wasn't like his other battles. Every strike felt watched, judged. Darkseid descended at last. Boots touching nothing, presence crushing everything. He met Superman's charge, head-on, and the impact sent shockwaves that rippled across continents. "You seek order," Darkseid growled, locking fists with Clark. "So do I." Superman strained, muscles screaming. "Your order is slavery." "And yours," Darkseid replied, eyes burning brighter, "is merely gentler chains." They tore through space, colliding again and again, neither yielding. Below them, the battle-raged heroes falling, mutants pushing back, civilians watching their sky become a war zone. And in the chaos, something shifted. People weren't looking at Superman with fear anymore. They were looking with expectation. Save us. Win. Don't feel, stay, fail. Clark felt it, felt the weight of billions of hopes pressing down on him harder than Darkseid's grip ever. Cliff. And in that crushing pressure, a terrible thought surfaced. If he won this, they would never stop relying on him. If he lost, everything ended. Darkseid smiled as if he sensed it. "Now you understand," he said. "This is what it means to be necessary." Superman roared, unleashing everything, heat vision burning like twin suns, strength unrestrained. We sharpened to a blade. That clash tore open a rift in space itself, and as reality split, the Phoenix screamed in pain, but warning, because the battle had crossed a line, and something worse than Darkseid was now watching through the fracture they had created. What if the war to save the world tore a hole in reality, so deep that even Darkseid realized something had gone terribly wrong? The rift didn't explode, it breathed a slow, unnatural expansion spread between the stars, space stretching like wounded flesh. Soundless pressure rolled outward, forcing lanterns to reinforce constructs. Iron Man's armor screaming warnings as physics itself began to misbehave. Superman felt it immediately, not as danger but as absence. Something was missing. The Phoenix recoiled, flames folding inward defensively. "That fracture doesn't belong to this universe," it warned. "It's not an invasion force, it's a correction." Darkseid's Omega beams flickered for the first time. "Impossible," he growled, staring into the rift. "This reality is not scheduled for erasure." From within the tear, light drained away, swallowed by a shape that was not darkness but negation. A vast, humanoid silhouette emerged, edges indistinct, as if existence itself refused to define it. Eyes opened, not glowing, not burning, empty. Every mind on Earth felt them, Jean screamed, clutching her head as the Phoenix shrieked inside her. Xavier, cleft, consciousness fragmenting under the psychic pressure. Even Darkseid stiffened, boots cracking invisible ground. The anti-life equation, Darkseid whispered, awe bleeding into fear. "No, this is beyond it." The being spoke, and the universe listened. "Anomaly detected," it said, voice layered with countless echoes. "Probabilities distortion traced to subject designation. Kal-El of Krypton." Superman hovered, frozen, not restrained, but examined. He felt memories peeling back, moments replayed. Every rescue, every restraint, every choice to bear the weight alone. "You have reduced variance," the entity continued. "Choice collapses around you, outcomes stabilize, conflict ceases." "That's not a crime," Superman said, forcing himself forward. "That's protection." The entity's head tilted slightly. "Protection without entropy equals stagnation. Stagnation equals decay." Darkseid snarled. "This world is mine to conquer, not erase." The entity didn't even look at him. With a casual gesture, Darkseid was thrown backward through space, smashing into his flagship hard enough to cripple it instantly. Apocalyptian warships began to shut down, systems failing as if they had simply been dismissed. Panic rippled through the battlefield. Cleft Batman's voice cut in, tight with something dangerously close to fear. That thing isn't here to win, it's here to reset. Superman understood. Not just Earth. Him. You're wrong, Clark said, voice steady despite the terror clawing at his thoughts. People still choose. I didn't take that away. You narrowed it, the entity replied. He became the constant. The Phoenix surged forward, fire blazing defiantly. He chose compassion and removed consequence. The entity answered, swatting the Phoenix aside with a wave of null force that scattered cosmic flame like dying embers. Superman moved. He flew straight into the entity's chest. No strategy, no restraint, pure refusal. The impact sent a shockwave across the rift, reality screaming in protest. For a moment, just a moment, the entity staggered. Clark felt it then. Not weakness, recognition. You feel responsible, the entity said inside his mind. You will sacrifice yourself to preserve variance. Superman clenched his fists, pain and clarity colliding. If that's what it takes, then yes. The battlefield froze. Everyone felt ether terrible, inevitable direction this was heading. Batman whispered, Clark, don't. But Superman had already made the decision, and the universe, watching closely, waited to see if its greatest threat was about to become its greatest sacrifice. What if saving the world meant Superman would have to stand against the very forces he had once called allies and risk becoming the monster everyone feared? The anti-life entity loomed above Earth, a silhouette of pure negation against the stars. Every superhero, every mutant, every human looking skyward felt the same weight as certainty that nothing could withstand what was coming. Even Darkseid, bruised and furious, floated in stunned silence, powerless against the incomprehensible force before him. Superman hovered between the entity and the planet, chest heaving, eyes glowing with the light of his sun burning in defiance. The Phoenix recoiled beside him, flames folding inward in quiet reverence. Magneto's metal halo quivered uncontrollably as if even steel itself knew it was outmatched. Batman's voice crackled in his earpiece, tense but steady. You're the only thing standing between Earth and erasure, Clark. Don't fail. Clark didn't reply. Words had never mattered more than action. Every muscle, every neuron, ounce of strength he possessed hummed with determination. He thought of the mutants he had saved, the humans he had protected, the countless lives relying on him without knowing it, and he realized the horrifying truth. To save them, he might have to do the unthinkable. The entity reached out, stretching its impossibly long arms toward the planet, reality itself warping under its touch. Entire cities flickered, replaced momentarily by glimpses of oblivion. Superman pushed forward, a blur of red and blue, his fists laced with heat vision and the unyielding force of his will. The first contact sent shockwaves that shattered satellites, displaced tectonic plates, and set the oceans roaring. Darkseid, recovering, attempted to intervene, hurling omega beams with lethal precision. But Superman intercepted each strike, not with aggression, but precision, deflecting the cosmic energy back toward the void from which it came. Every move was calculated, every choice balanced between mercy and survival. Clark, Jean's voice rang, Phoenix energy flaring around her. You can't do this alone. I don't have a choice, he shouted, pushing past her. If I falter, they all die. The entity's voice resonated in his mind, cold and endless. You perceive morality as static. You mistake consequence for compassion. You are the anomaly. Superman's eyes narrowed. I am responsibility, he said. I am hope, and I won't let this world die not while I still breathe. With a thunderous roar, he propelled himself at impossible speed, crashing into the entity's chest. The impact wasn't destructive in the traditional sense, it was philosophical. Superman's presence radiated an idea, defiance, choice, the potential of hope, even in the face of ultimate erasure. The anti-life silhouette faltered. It had never encountered such resistance. Not armies, not gods, not devils, not even Darkseid. Superman was unpredictable, variable, human, alien, God, something it could not calculate. could not reduce the equation or inevitability. And yet the price of standing was immense. Energy from the collision ripped through Superman, pain burning like stars, collapsing within him. The Phoenix surged to shield him, Jean screaming in agony as her mind and fire intertwined with his. Magneto fought to maintain stability in the metals around him, his fury now aligned with survival rather than vengeance. From below, humans and mutants watched, powerless to intervene, as their champion became both shield and spear against the collapse of reality itself. In that moment, every eye turned skyward, every hope, every prayer, every silent wish coalesced into a single truth. The world depended on him, but at what cost? Clark's vision blurred. For a fleeting instant, he saw himself not as hero but as tyrant, the very thing he had feared becoming. And then, like a flare igniting in the night, he remembered why he had chosen this path. Because someone had to bear the weight of impossible responsibility. Someone had to stand between chaos and life. Someone had to carry the world on shoulders that could not bend. With a final surge of strength, he pushed the entity away from Earth, forcing the being to retreat into the void, back through the fracture. It had opened, the rift began to close, light and matter reasserting themselves as the cosmos recalibrated. Superman hovered, barely conscious, bleeding strength from every pore. Phoenix fire wrapping around him like a mantle of shared endurance. Below, mutants and humans alike began to stir, realizing that for the first time in generations, their fates were not entirely at the mercy of fear, violence, or cosmic calculation. Hope had survived. The cost was not yet clear, but it had endured, and somewhere in the shadows, Darkseid watched, furious yet intrigued, already plotting the next move. The world had been saved, but the question lingered, saved by whom, and at what price? What if? The aftermath of victory revealed that even Superman's triumph came with consequences no one had anticipated. The sky over Earth had returned to its familiar blue, clouds drifting lazily over cities and oceans. Yet, beneath the calm, the world had changed. Every life, every heartbeat, carried the echo of the cosmic confrontation. Superman floated above Metropolis, cape tattered, suit scorched, yet eyes still ablaze with determination. The anti-life entity was gone for now, but its presence had left a mark. Mutants emerged from hiding. The Phoenix hovered cautiously, beside Jean, energy subdued, its cosmic fire reflecting both awe and unease. Magneto landed heavily beside them, hair whipped by residual winds, metal lingering uneasily in the air. Even Darkseid, retreating through the remnants of his shattered fleet, had left traces of his power that vibrated like a heartbeat across the planet. "Clark," Xavier said, voice trembling with relief and caution, "the world is watching. They see you. Why you did, I know," Superman replied quietly. "They'll also see what it cost." Every student, every mutant, every human who had witnessed the battle realized something fundamental. The world they knew the rules. They had learned to trust. He had shifted. Superman's intervention had prevented catastrophe, yes, but it had also established a precedent. One man's judgment, one alien's power, could decide the fate of millions. Jean's eyes softened as she looked at him. "You carried the burden, alone," she said, voice trembling with both fear and gratitude. "I don't think anyone could have done what you just did." Clark shook his head. "He wasn't alone. You, Magneto, Batman, all of you. Everyone who fought alongside mere choices mattered." Magneto crossed his arms, skepticism etched deep into his features. "And yet the world still fears you. I feel it. Fear isn't something you can sweep aside, no matter how powerful you are." Superman looked toward the horizon, feeling the subtle tremor of humanity's unease. Governments, civilians, mutants, and heroes alike were all recalculating. Trust had been given and tested. Freedom had been preserved. But it now carried a new tension. The people might see him as savior, but others would see him as the ultimate authority, the one being capable of enforcing their destiny against their will. Batman's voice came from the shadows, calm but measured. "You've won this battle, Clark, but the war for hearts and minds, that's just beginning. People respect power, yes, but they fear control. You need to be careful. All you've done might backfire." Clark nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of that truth. He had saved the world from annihilation. Yet he had also reshaped the way it thought about justice, freedom, and responsibility. Even the mutants, for whom he had gone to extraordinary lengths, were watching him now with a mixture of gratitude and caution. The phoenix rose fully, stretching across the sky like a beacon. "There's more to do," Jean whispered, her voice infused with cosmic authority. "The balance you restored is fragile. You can't do everything alone, Clark." Superman looked down at the planet he had protected, the people he had saved, and the future he had altered. A single truth settled deep in his chest. Hope endured, but it was no longer a quiet, passive thing. It was fragile, demanding vigilance, sacrifice, and, most importantly, humility. And for the first time, Superman understood that being the world's greatest protector also meant being its greatest responsibility, and that every choice, every intervention carried consequences that no power, no matter how vast, could fully control. As he hovered above Earth, Phoenix fire flickering gently around him, he realized the journey wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The world had survived, but the question lingered: could it survive the man who saved it? Because Superman had changed. The world had changed, and nothing would ever be the same again. The end.